everyone, and welcome to this webinar on connecting developer community in an enterprise data architecture. The developer community at large has always been an invaluable part of the data architecture business, powering with a lot of the data modeling techniques that I've built over the course of the years. In this webinar, we tend to go ahead and present on how Studio Data Architect can help you with the basics of developing a logical data model and also going ahead and leveraging this to uh, a design-based principle in your enterprise architecture needs. So let me go ahead and kickstart this. So what we're understanding here is how we can bridge the gap between developing an enterprise logical model and also being able to tie that to an enterprise data architecture with your developers here in mind. You have a couple of things. The first and foremost is where you would actually go ahead and kickstart a brand new data model from scratch. Here, I'm just going to go ahead and kickstart a brand new logical data model. One of the first things that you will do is you'll go ahead and insert a title block. And here you'll just give it a name. So here I'll just call it as e-commerce. There's some metadata here on what the diagram is going to be about. And here I'm just going to go ahead and start adding a couple of entities. So here, if I double click on this, I can kickstart things off by using the orders table entity. So I can go ahead and do that. So once this launches here, give me just a second here. It's just taking a little bit because it's running on a virtual machine. Appreciate your patience. Okay, let me go ahead and do this here. Then let me see if I can log in here. There we go. All right, so now what I can do is I can go ahead and add a new entity. There we go. So here I can actually start adding like orders. And here I can add in like order ID, add this to the primary key. And then I can just say customer ID. And then product ID, for example. So next what I'll do is I'll go ahead and add this to the customer products table here. Does anybody have any questions? Let me just take a look. Okay, let me just shorten the resolution. Give me 1 second, please. Is this any better? Can I get a quick show of hands? Is this better? Are you folks able to see this now? Okay, good. Excellent. Sorry about that. Let me go ahead and put this here. There we go. So now here in the other entity, actually not this one. Let me go to the other one. And let me go into the repository login. Okay, so here if I edit entity, here I can actually call this as products. And here what I'll do is I'll just call it as product name. And here I'll just call it orders or customers actually. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and insert a relationship from the order ID here to the product. And what I'll do is I'll do the customer ID into here. And lastly, I'll take the product ID here as well. So I'll do this as a different one. And from here, from the order ID, I'll put this here. So there you go. So now I'm actually slowly building out my e-commerce application. And then what I'll do is I'll go ahead and generate a physical data model. As a developer, we need to then choose what database platform we're going to target. Here, I'm just going to target Microsoft SQL Server 2019. And SQL Server. And now what we can do is we can actually then go ahead and generate our database. And we can generate our SQL scripts that we can actually go ahead and put in as part of the deployment. So here I'll just call it as deployment script. Next, what I can do is I can actually choose if I want to deploy this to an actual database or create a brand new SQL Server database. I will just ignore that. And you also have the ability to look at the SQL preview here that you can actually go ahead and click here. Once that is done, you can then go and choose next and hit finish. So now the script is ready. I'll go ahead and open it up in Notepad. So here I can open it up here on the desktop. So here if I go under modified, look at my SQL script. Actually, if I go back here, so here if I go under deployment script, and then I can say edit. And this is where this deployment script is now ready for me as a developer to go and deploy into my favorite CI/CD pipeline, and then have that being generated for my end users in the database. Next, what we'll do is as part of any kind of dev to database application lifecycle, you're always challenged as a architect to also go ahead and make sure that the changes reflect if there's any newer entities being added or is there anything that needs to be changed. So here, if I go ahead and make a change in the entity of customers, for example, I can actually go ahead and edit the entity now. And here I can just go ahead and add, let's say I want to add the customer address. So go ahead and do that. Now that I've added the customer address, I would like to go ahead and save this model first. And here what I can do is I can right click on the customer entity. And I can use the compare and merge utility that will actually go ahead and compare this with the actual file. So here I want to compare this against this different physical data model. And here I'm interested in only the customer and entity and the table. So I'll compare those two. Here you'll see ER Studio has automatically gone ahead and identified the change. All you have to do is choose merge into target into getting that into the table and hit OK. And now if I come back to the customer's table here, I get the address. Now, in order to push, again, any kind of changes back to your database system, you can go ahead and generate the database, and you can compare it with that and synchronize the changes into your local database. You can either do it through scripts, or you can just directly connect to that database and apply the changes. Next, what we have is, as part of any kind of enterprise architecture, you want to do some kind of enforcement of naming standards. So that's where our naming standards templates come into play. This is where you can actually go ahead and start building your custom naming fields. So here, if I just give sample, and I'll give it at the logical level, I'll give it like uppercase. And here I can give it as uppercase here as well. And here I'll just make it as lowercase. There you go. And then under the mapping section, you can actually go ahead and add your own mapping document, so to speak, right? So you can actually go ahead and choose that and add that here. You also have the order, logical order and physical order of parts that you can go ahead and leverage. Then you have the general option here that you can choose the delimiter options here as well. Then I can go into my binding information. And here, if I look under the entity, I can actually just go ahead and select all of them. Now, in order to run this and validate, I'll just choose the physical data model here. I can then go, excuse me, I can then choose the naming standards utility. And here I can choose select all, choose my naming standards template. Then I can choose physical and run the translation. There you can see the output, but here it translates into that as well. Now that we have worked on this, the next thing we might want to do as part of our developer enterprise framework is to actually link this to our repository. So I'll go ahead and add this diagram to our repository here. And before I do that, I wanted to bring your attention to this data dictionary. So this data dictionary right now is tied to this local file. Now, with this local file now going into the enterprise, into the repository, I'm going to convert that to an enterprise data dictionary so that anybody who's got access to the repository and the model can make a change only at one single place. So now I'll go ahead and, excuse me, I'll go to the repository, and here I'll go to the project center. And here I can go ahead and click on the projects tab. And here I'll choose e-commerce project. Hit OK. And now I'll go ahead and add the diagram, this current diagram. And I'll go into the project for ecom. And you'll notice that I do have the enterprise data model here. So I'll just choose ecom underscore EDD. Just hit OK. And now here you can see how we can leverage this to our advantage by just focusing on just the enterprise data dictionary, and the local data dictionary is now empty. So that's your next step. Now, once we have gathered with the enterprise data dictionary here, we have what is known as a name release. So I can actually go ahead and set this. If I want to create a snapshot of this model for my next development framework in terms of putting it into a CI/CD pipeline, I can actually have this as a version control area. So Let's call this as ecom first. Call it baseline. And there you go. Next, what I can do is I can actually click on get name release. And here, if I go under my ecom model, you will see that I have a camera-like icon here that actually goes ahead and signifies the name release. So now I can just open it up, and there you go. So these are all the snapshots, if you will. So if you come from a database background, you'll be familiar with the concept of snapshots. So this is basically like a mirror image before you go ahead and make any changes. So that's there. The next thing you might want to do is to actually look at your version history to see who did what. So right now the admin username added an object, then I set a name release. And right now the object is not being checked out, but if I wanted to go ahead and check it out, I can check out the diagram itself. So let me just check out the diagram. And now if I wanted to go under repository and version history, you'll see that the checkout status has been given by my username and by machine name. Now that we're done with this, we can actually go ahead and check in the diagram. Excellent. Next, let's take a look at how you can generate a report out of this. This is one of the final stages that you will do as a developer. So here we can go ahead and choose an HTML report. And here, if I double click, you can see on the left-hand side, we have our e-commerce model. Then on the right-hand side is something that we have here. And one of the other things that we have is we can look at any of these other metadata items that are to the right. And here we have our data dictionary, naming standards template. And of course, lastly, we have our image that we can go ahead and generate. Now we can go ahead and hit finish. It goes and generates the diagram for us. So now if I expand this, look at the model image, I have this nice. And then here I can actually go ahead and show you, here we have the DDL, etc. So this is at a very high level of how you can take ER Studio Data Architect from a logical data model all the way up to a physical data model, generate the code, then also go ahead and generate, add it to a version control repository, make some changes, again, check in back those changes, create a version that you have like a baseline, plus, and finally, being able to generate a report out of this. All right. Well, with that, we would like to thank you for attending another awesome ER Studio presentation, and then we will look forward to talking to you all soon. Have a great day. Bye-bye.